Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Lil Yachty record, Let's Start Here. Out of all of the pop-adjacent rappers out there, Lil Yachty could arguably be considered one of the more underappreciated MCs in the game right now. First coming onto most people's radar in 2016 with the Lil Boat mixtape, he's constantly been putting out southern trap-based music with enough fresh experimentation to reasonably stand out from the crowd. I mean, sure, he's not the most unique voice out there or anything like that. He's not a Kendrick Lamar, he's not a Tyler the Creator or anything like that, but Lil Yachty is Lil Yachty. He's a reasonably unique guy, and I do genuinely hope that his catalog up to this point gets reevaluated someday, because while he may not be the most distinct fish in the pond or anything like that, he is worthy of higher praise than he usually gets. The 2022 hit song Poland was an unexpected piece of fantastic music. I mean, really, it was one of the most inexplicably mesmerizing songs of last year. It was just so incredibly hypnotizing in a way. It's a song that is really nothing but everything at the same time, and maybe that's just me hyping up a pretty much meaningless song a bit too much, but really it is a fantastic track that if you somehow manage to miss, you need to hear, as it really did show off the most interesting side of Lil Yachty that we have seen so far. That being said, songs like Poland being a bit of artistic growth, a bit of development for him, no one could have expected anything like Let's Start Here. This is most people's magnum opus, and that should not be coming from Lil Yachty at all. Let's Start Here is just a total creative revamp for Yachty as an artist. I mean, really, this does not feel like the same dude that made albums like Lil Boat 3. And that's not to say those albums are bad or that this album is bad. It's just a total creative jump, not even a 180. It's just a complete backflip followed by a somersault into a totally different sound and style of music. And the title here, Let's Start Here, feels remarkably fitting for this album as a whole, as it kind of does feel like Yachty is requesting that you, the listener, ignore his back catalog up to this point and look at this new album as a starting point for him, the starting point of a new era of his sound. Let's Start Here really does range the artistic spectrum pretty freely overall, as the record is just as rooted in space rock as it is neo-soul, and the surrealist elements that are found on this record are just as mystifying, if not at times more so, than some of the great experimental psychedelic acts of the century so far, like Tame Impala or Beach House. To be frank, it's absolutely insane to hear Yachty take on so many different musical concepts so successively, with so much success, just at such a rapid rate. It doesn't feel right almost, but it is absolutely right, because this album is utterly fantastic, if you couldn't tell by my praise so far. But all the same, Yachty has also not lost what has made him him in the past. He really does maintain his lackadaisical, almost stoner-esque flow and delivery style that has defined his persona throughout his career thus far, leaving me to just say that this isn't critical pandering or anything like that. Let's Start Here is just natural artistic progression done at supersonic speed. Yachty himself has also greatly grown as a performer on Let's Start Here, alongside the breadth of his influences and aesthetic choices here, because while he does mostly maintain his same tone and delivery style, as I have previously stated from his prior records, the more heartfelt and honest emotional moments on Let's Start Here have never felt as open in Lil Yachty's discography before. This is a record that sounds so genuine, and that's not really something to be expected from him. Of course, Yachty himself promoted this as an album with live instrumentation that was meant to be more open and honest than any of his previous works, but that goes far beyond the presence of instrumentation in the studio. This really seeps into his own performance. Tracks like The Zone see Yachty get unusually genuine with the listener overall, and you even have cuts like Failure, a spoken word track that could have easily been a cliche transitional piece, but ends up feeling more like a really heart-to-heart talk between Yachty and the listener. Really, nothing in this album should work, considering who's making it, when it's coming out, and the fact that this is coming from a man that is not necessarily known for being the most emotional artist in the world or anything like that, but honestly, this album is beautiful. You've also got tracks here like The Alchemist that just boost themselves with a little bit of fire, really demonstrating Lil Yachty's charisma as a means to diversify the sonic palette of the album overall. And all I can really say is that in the making of this record, there obviously needed to be a lot of creative ambition to really just get this together conceptually alone, not even discussing performance. So obviously, Yachty himself needed to really get into the zone here. He really needed to dial up his performance work, and that's exactly what he did. This is the performance of a lifetime on this album. Everything just comes together so seamlessly on Let's Start Here, and that just doesn't seem like it should happen. It doesn't seem like that should be a thing that occurs. Something as ambitious as this from an artist as newly experimental as Lil Yachty, creating something as conceptually cohesive as Let's Start Here just doesn't seem like it has a probability of existing, but it does. The record itself rises and falls in perfect synchronicity with the lyrical and aesthetic content of the record, which changes from song to song, yet never really feels out of place or jumbled together. And this album can feel both lovesick and heartbroken while pulling both of those off in the same manner in a completely honest way. In fact, it isn't too much of a stretch to call Let's Start Here one long song. I mean, obviously this is divided into a bunch of songs, but every track manages to bleed into the next without a single hitch, and the intensity ebbs and flows appropriately with the notion of this being one singular piece. And honestly, even though this is something that can be experienced with, cherry-picking individual tracks, this is one of those records that needs to be heard from front to back. There is no other proper way to experience this. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say here is that an album like Let's Start Here is a very fragile thing, and it can easily be messed up and just not done correctly with poor pacing or tracks that just don't go together well, an album that feels thrown together under the guise of ambition or conceptualism, but that just isn't true here. Yachty obviously knew that an album like this could potentially unravel in his hands had he not taken the proper steps to care for it and make it into a cohesive record, and that's what he did. He managed to make something that is incredibly impressive, that just flows together so naturally, so beautifully, and I have no doubt in my mind that this is the best album of the year so far. So overall, in a world with a number of Lil Yachty projects that are mostly solid but at times creatively underwhelming, saying that his latest studio album is an early contender for Album of the Year just did not seem that likely a mere few weeks ago at that. But here we are today with Let's Start Here, an album that has genuinely blown me away, not only because of who it's by, but just in the actual sense of the content itself. Perhaps this is the start of a new era for Lil Yachty as an artist, an era where he is a powerhouse creatively as he topples any preconceptions of what artists like him can or cannot do creatively. I can't really say, but I digress. My reaction to Let's Start Here is my reaction to a number of different tracks on this record, which is that I am genuinely blown away. I'm going to give this record 4.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that's the end of this album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.